So how do we actually know what happened in the ancient world? I mean, it's not like they left behind video diaries, right? We have to become historical detectives, piecing together the past from the tiniest of clues, a line carved in stone, a design on a coin, or even a detail from a play. Today, let's see how just a few of these clues can bring an entire empire back to life.
Our whole investigation kicks off with a really simple story. There's a boy, Arvind, and he's in a school play. He's landed the role of a king. Pretty cool, right? He's probably thinking about the sword, the crown, but then he reads the script and finds out his character also has to play a stringed instrument called a veena and recite poetry.
And that, right there, is our big mystery. A musician king? Who was this guy? And maybe more importantly, how on earth could a detail that personal, I mean, it's basically a hobby, survive for over 1,500 years? That is the question we're going to dig into.
All right, let's dive right in and solve this mystery of the musician king.
Okay, so the king Arvind was playing? It was Samudragupta, one of the most celebrated rulers of the Gupta dynasty. And the main reason we know so much about him is because of one incredible source, a long, detailed inscription carved onto a massive stone pillar.
Now, this kind of inscription has a special name, a prashasti. It comes from a Sanskrit word that means in praise of, and that's exactly what it is. Think of it as an official, public hype piece, written by a court poet whose main job was to make their king sound like an absolute superhero. And trust me, they did not hold back. This prashasti, written by Samudragupta's court poet Harisena, paints this picture of a legendary warrior. I mean, listen to this. His body was considered charming because it was covered in scars from hundreds of different weapons. To them, these weren't injuries, they were trophies.
But here's the twist that solves Arvind's mystery. The very same text that goes on and on about his battle scars also calls him the best of poets and a deeply learned man. And we know this isn't just the poet exaggerating, because we have other evidence to back it up. Coins from his reign that literally show him playing the veena. He wasn't just a warrior, he was an artist.
So we've solved mystery number one. But this prashasti, it's so much more than a character description. It's basically a strategic blueprint. Now we're going to see how this one piece of praise actually helps us map out an entire empire.
You see, the poet Harisena didn't just list Samudragupta's awesome qualities, he detailed his entire foreign policy. It's actually incredible. The Prashasti outlines 4 completely different strategies he used for dealing with 4 different kinds of rulers around him.
Let's just compare 2 of them. For the rulers of Aryavarta to the north, his policy was pretty brutal. The Prashasti says 9 rulers were totally uprooted and their kingdoms were just absorbed into his empire. Simple. But for the 12 rulers to the south, in Dakshinapatha, a totally different game plan. He defeated them in battle, sure, but then he let them keep their thrones as long as they accepted him as their overlord.
And it didn't stop there. For the states right on his borders, that inner circle, they had to bring him gifts, follow his orders, and show up at his court. And for rulers even further out, in the outer circle, they submitted to him and even offered their daughters in marriage to create powerful alliances. This one document gives us a full strategic map of his empire.
So, the big takeaway here is that one Prashasti can be an absolute goldmine. But, good historians never want to rely on just one clue. So let's see how we back this stuff up by looking at other kings and the stories they left behind.
And you start to see a pattern. For Samudragupta, we have the Prashasti from Harisena. For another really important king, Harshavardhana, we actually have a full-on biography, the Harshacharitha. And for his great rival, Pulakeshin II, what do you know, another Prashasti, this time by a poet named Ravikirti. Each ruler left behind a different kind of clue for us to find.
And these poets, they really had a flair for the dramatic. When Pulakeshin II defeated Harsha and stopped his army from marching south, his court poet wrote this absolutely brilliant line. He said that after the defeat, Harsha was no longer Harsha. It's a fantastic little pun, since the name Harsha literally means happiness.
Okay, so we're getting a real sense of these rulers. But a king is one thing. How do you actually run one of these huge kingdoms day to day? How did they manage the administration and command their armies?
Well, during this period, we start to see some really big changes in how things were run. For one, really important government jobs often became hereditary, passed down from father to son. Our poet Harisena, for example, was a chief minister, just like his dad. Also, it was common for one powerful person to hold several offices at once. And third, the whole structure of the army started to shift, with kings relying more and more on powerful military leaders.
These military leaders were called samantas, and the way they were compensated is super interesting. They didn't get a regular salary. Instead, the king would grant them a huge piece of land. They would then collect taxes from that land to pay for their soldiers, their horses, all their equipment. It was a pretty effective system, but you can imagine it also meant these samantas could get really powerful on their own.
But you know, all this talk about kings and poets and powerful military leaders, it kind of leaves out the biggest question of all, doesn't it? What was life like for everybody else? What was going on beyond those palace walls?
Answering that is a lot trickier. We have to look for clues in different places. We get little glimpses from the plays written by famous poets like Kalidasa, from the incredibly detailed travel journals of Chinese pilgrims like Fa Xian, and even reading between the lines of those official royal stories.
The plays of Kalidasa, for instance, give us this fascinating social clue. In his stories, the king and other high-ranking men all speak the very formal classical language of Sanskrit. But women, and pretty much all the other characters, speak a more common language called Prakrit. A person's language literally told you their place in society.
And some of these clues, well, they reveal the really harsh realities of that social structure. The Chinese pilgrim Fa Xian wrote about the terrible situation of people who were treated as untouchables. He described how if they entered a town, they had to strike a piece of wood to make a sound, basically as a warning, so that other people could move away and avoid even touching them.
And finally, remember that glorious army we heard about earlier? The one that gave the king his charming battle scars? Well, for ordinary people living in the villages, that army meant something very different. The poet Banabhatta wrote about how the king's elephants would trample villagers' huts, and as the massive force passed by, the whole world was swallowed up in dust.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? It's that history is never just one simple story. It's a giant puzzle, and to really understand the past, you need all the pieces. You need the grand, glowing praise of the Prashasti, but you also need the silent story told by a single coin, the social clues hidden in a play, and that vivid image of a world being swallowed by the dust of an army on the move.
The praise for these ancient kings was literally carved in stone, designed to last forever. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What kinds of clues are we leaving behind right now? And 1,500 years from today, how will our world and our leaders be remembered?